Okay, we're live. Good morning, everyone. I am Katie. I'm the lead developer advocate at BigCommerce. And today I'm here with Riley from Gadget, and we're going to go through building an app live using Gadget's BigCommerce integration. So I'm just going to kick it right over to you, Riley.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So, hey, everyone. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Gadget, what we do, what we are. And then I'm just going to build an app end to end. It's going to be full stack, database, backend, front end. And it's going to be for BigCommerce embedded in the control panel. So I'm just going to go through a bit of a Gadget spiel to start, just in case you're not familiar with the platform. So what we believe at Gadget is that building apps over and over again from scratch takes way too long. You're not putting enough time or spending enough time building things that makes your app unique. So whether you're building a public app for a marketplace, some sort of SaaS, or a custom app on a BigCommerce store, you have to go through the same steps of setting up all of your tooling and infrastructure before you can actually get to writing the code that makes your app unique. So Gadget tries to alleviate those issues. We're going to take care of hosting your entire full stack app. Out of the box, we're going to give you a Postgres database. It's going to be a serverless node backend. We're going to give you a React front end powered by Vite. The whole thing will be serverless. We're going to manage and scale your infrastructure, so you don't need to worry about DevOps. That's our infrastructure team's problem. And you can really just set up the connection to BigCommerce. We'll give you that full stack app and start writing your unique code, building your unique features, your unique data models right away. So just a little bit more information here. We have scaled. We're getting into the BigCommerce space, but we've been in the Shopify space for a while, and so it's a reliable service. I'm just going to dive right into the demo because that's more interesting. Enough with the slides here. So I'm just going to start by creating my new Gadget app. So I'm at gadget.dev. I can just go to gadget.new. And I can select my BigCommerce app type. So I'm just going to build, it's a very simple app. I'm going to give merchants an embedded front end in the control panel that allows them to enter keywords. If any of those keywords match the words in a product description, I'm just going to write those matched words back to my products as search keywords. So this will just be like an automatic search keyword generation tool that runs whenever a product in BigCommerce is created or updated. And I'm also going to just chat quickly, I won't go through it, how we can sync all of our historical data through this app as well. So I'll just go ahead and give my app a name. I'm just going to call this like Riley's product search keyword. Leave it at that. If you go to create an app, you will not see this TypeScript support button, but it is coming very soon. So if you do want to build your apps in TypeScript, you can go ahead and do that out of the box. When I create my new app, this does give me my full stack app. I'm not going to walk through the editor right now. I'm going to start just by connecting to BigCommerce. So when I click this, I see some pretty familiar looking URLs, my callbacks. So I can actually start just by diving right into my BigCommerce DevTools page, and I will create a new app. I am just going to go ahead, call it the exact same thing, copy and paste this over, and press create. So we've got our callback URLs. I just need to copy them from Gadget to BigCommerce. And so I don't need to do any infrastructure setup myself. If I want the uninstall or remove user callback, I can just show all URLs. I'll do the uninstall for now, but I don't really need either of them for this little demo. And then I'm just selecting what scopes I want for my app. So because I want to read in products and then write back those search keywords, I'm going to go my products modify scope, but Gadget should work for whatever scopes you need because we're just going to call the BigCommerce API like we would any other app. I'm happy with this, so I'll just update and close. And then I will grab my client ID and secret, copy them back to Gadget. And once I do this, press confirm. I'm ready to install my app on one of my sandbox stores now. So Gadget is going to handle all of BigCommerce's OAuth for me. I'll just select my Riley's Gadget Sandbox store. And I can just install right away. So I haven't written any code yet. It's just been a couple minutes here. And we're going to get our full stack app infrastructure here set up on a BigCommerce store, and I can really just start building. So there we go. We have our front end. So this is it's our React front end. We've pre-installed Big Design so you can use it to build your embedded apps that look and feel like the rest of the BigCommerce ecosystem. And if I just flip back to Gadget, we are successfully connected. So that's great. I'll close this. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to start by popping open my web folder. So there's API and web. API is my backend. That's going to be my data models, my database, as well as my serverless node backend. I'm going to start just with web briefly, because if I go to my store, we see edit this page, web routes, index.jsx. So if I go into my web routes, index.jsx page, and let's update some text here. You see it is just plain old React. So I just say hello. Instead, this updates. So hot module reloading is built in. It feels like your typical front-end dev experience. One other thing to note is that we do have a CLI tool. So I'm gonna go through this demo here in the Gadget web editor. But if I run my CLI, it does bring down my project locally, which is pretty nice. So I can use my own local editor to actually build projects. I'm going to go into my API folder now. So this is my backend. So you see, we have created a couple data models for you. So Gadget has run migrations on our Postgres database. I've got a BigCommerce namespace, and we have a store table in my database. So if I click on the schema, these are my fields or my columns on my database table. It just contains some basic information about the stores that this app is installed on. So if I click on data, I get my store hash. My registered webhooks and scopes are here. Just a little bit of information to get me started, but it is important because then we can use this to do multi-tenancy, which Gadget is going to support out of the box. And we need that store hash to actually write back to BigCommerce. So this is kind of just all the initial setup we've done is we're handling like front-end session tokens. We've got your full stack app. We've handled BigCommerce's OAuth. So I can actually just start building my app now. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a custom data model. So I want to be able to store my product information here in Gadget. So I can just create a product model. And just like that, we are once again running Postgres migrations automatically under the hood. And I've got a product data table that I can now add custom fields to. So I'll just start by adding a couple fields. I will do a BigCommerce ID field, make that a number. I'm going to add just a bunch of fields related to products. So we'll go name, we'll go product description, because I need the description to go ahead and actually parse through to actually write search keywords back. I'll also add search keywords. It's not actually required for this app, but it's a nice way for us to validate that our app is working properly. And then I am going to be writing back to BigCommerce, so I do need to add all of the required fields that the API needs. So that's going to be weight, price, type, and finally, because this is Postgres, I'll change the types of all these fields in a tick here. I'm going to add a relationship to my store model here in Gadget. So it is Postgres, it is relational. So if I scroll down, I see a whole bunch of relationship fields. So I can say my product belongs to my store model, and that my store has many products. I could say my store has one product. That would be a very uninteresting store, or maybe the most interesting store, and an app that goes along with it. So I'll select has many for now, and that's just the inverse of that relationship. My type is, of course, in enum, and I can add options. If I can spell physical and digital. Price is a number, weight is a number. I will say we also have support for different field types. So if you're doing file storage, we will host files on our CDN. Vector, if you're working with OpenAI vector embeddings, we have support for that. And then there's also some, password encrypted strings, some more secure storage methods as well. There's also built-in validations that we offer. So if I go to my store, like I don't want to create a new product without relating it to a store, so I can just make it required. You can also go ahead. I'm just going to make all the required fields by the API required, but you can also write your own custom validation. It'll generate a little code file that you can then go ahead and add. So I'm just making all the required fields required, name, BigCommerce ID. And finally, I can add a uniqueness validation to my ID. And because BigCommerce product IDs aren't globally unique, I can go ahead and scope this uniqueness by my store relationship. So this will guarantee that my BigCommerce IDs for my product or product IDs will be unique per store. Once again, that's getting into the multi-tenancy that Gadget is baking in. Which is pretty groovy. So that's my BigCommerce product data model. I also need a data model to go ahead and store data entered by my merchants. That's those custom search keywords that they're going to enter in an admin or control panel UI. So I'll just go ahead and create search keyword. It'll spin up that new data model. This one, I just need a value. It's going to be a string and it's going to be required. Now, as I'm going ahead and creating these data models, you'll notice we also have this actions folder here in Gadget with some JavaScript files. And if I just check out the create.js file or create action for my search keyword model, this is my serverless node backend. This is where I can go ahead, add whatever custom code I need to power my application. So these are fully extensible. By default, all this is going to do is when I call create, it will go ahead and save this search keyword record to my Gadget database. The trigger section off to the side here, it's triggered by an API call because this is our action that we're calling. So it gives you snippets in JavaScript using our API client. You get a React sample if you're calling this from the front end. So we have a suite of React hooks. You can see use action that you can use to call your Gadget API in a Reactful way. And then under the hood, everything is GraphQL. So we'll give you this mutation as well. And something that's kind of neat is that as you build, we're going to auto-generate API documentation for your application. So you can see I'm brought to this API section in my docs. I have my search keyword model selected here under the schema settings. And I get docs for creating, which is visible now. We got the same little snippet we saw in the Gadget editor. But I get docs for all of my Gadget actions. This is everything we've auto-created. Create, update, delete. There's also an upsert. And we get docs for bulk actions, reading many records, pagination, and then there's generic docs for things like sorting and filtering. So it's all here in the API section, and it is unique to your app, which is kind of groovy. If I want to test out this action, I can also click run action. It pops open a API playground. This is just JavaScript for now. I'll go cozy. And I can see that it has run my create action. This is the response, the created record. So if I go check out my data page, I see cozy has been successfully added to my database. So this is now data that I am storing in Gadget. And I will just note, we also have a GraphQL playground. If that is more your flavor, you can go ahead and enter your mutations and queries here. So that kind of covers data modeling. So we're auto-generating this backend CRUD API for you. We're handling that BigCommerce connection. I can also add custom actions if I want. I won't do it now. I just really need to add a little bit of custom code to my backend that is going to go ahead and actually run the logic of my app. And in order to do that, I first need to subscribe to BigCommerce webhooks. So anytime I get a product create, update, or delete webhook here, I want to go ahead and run some custom code, check to see if product description matches any of my stored keywords. So I'm going to create an action in this actions folder. So it's different than a model action. We call these global actions. It's at the root level or underneath our API folder. And so if I just create a file, BigCom, there's a C in BigCommerce there, handle product webhooks. This creates a new global action. By default, we're going to generate this API endpoint for you, but we don't actually need to trigger this with an API endpoint. Instead, I can select BigCommerce, And this is how Gadget is going to help you subscribe to BigCommerce webhooks. So if I just go product created, all of a sudden this action here, this serverless node function, is going to be run whenever a product created webhook is fired by my BigCommerce store. So I'm going to test this out first. I'm going to go ahead and just write using the built-in logger. And we can go params. This will be my incoming webhook payload. Incoming webhook. Perfect. So if I test this out and go back to my sandbox store, just create a new product. I will call this jeans. Perfect. We'll set a price. We'll set a weight. We'll save that. It should fire that webhook. And I should go ahead and see jeans here when the webhook comes in. And there we go. So we got the incoming webhook. We see my param. So this is the webhook payload that is being sent by BigCommerce. So that's great. So we are successfully subscribed to webhooks. Now I need to go ahead and kind of fetch the rest of my product data. And so I'm going to use that. These aren't just plain old serverless functions. They're high context. We're giving you this high context parameter that gives you everything you need to communicate with the rest of your Gadget app and communicate with BigCommerce. So API is a client you can use to call this auto-generated API that we're creating for you in Gadget. So this is your apps API. Connections is how I can write back and read data from BigCommerce. So I'm first just going to set up a BigCommerce API client. We'll go const BigCommerce equals, we'll use this connections object. We'll go BigCommerce. And because we know what BigCommerce store is firing this webhook, we're going to automatically initialize this client for you. So we can just go .current. I don't need to initialize or authenticate my client at all. It's just going to be done out of the box. And then to fetch product data, I can just go product equals await, and then use this client to actually fetch data. So we're going to go get, and we're going to go catalog. Oh, yeah. Catalog products, product ID, and we'll just pass in the product ID we need as a path. Product ID, and that's going to be the params ID, which is, once again, the ID in our webhook payload. And let's write this to the logger now. Product, my product. Perfect. You might be asking yourself, what the heck is this API client? Like we're just using this API. Gadget is Node, so there is a package JSON file. We're just wrapping the Space48 BigCommerce API client up for you. So we're initializing it, and then the rest of the API client is untouched. So it's what the Space48 team has built for you, which is pretty awesome. It works great. So I see a little error here. There we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and fetch the rest of my product data. I'm going to create another new product here and test that out. Actually, I'm going to do one more thing first. I can go ahead and actually save my product to my Gadget database. And I'm going to do that using the API client. So if I go api.bigcommerce.product, that's that autogen create action. And then I can go ahead and fill in the fields I need. So we've got our BigCommerce ID. It's going to be our product ID. We have name. We have description. We have type. Product.weight. There's going to be a price on there. We have our search keywords. I think this is about it here. And then the final piece is just the relationship to the store. And so because this is a relationship, I use slightly different syntax to set it up. And I need to add the ID of the store as it's stored in Gadget. So it's not going to be a field coming from BigCommerce. If I click on my store data page, I want this ID, this one. So we're giving you a helper in order to get that. It's in our connections object. And once again, because we know the current store, we can just go current store ID there. And so what this should do is actually go ahead and create the new product in our Gadget database. So now I'll create a new product. I will call this t-shirt. Perfect. Heavy t-shirt. Save it. And what this should do, call our client, get the product from BigCommerce, and then save it in our database. So if I check out my data, my t-shirt is here. So that is fantastic. If I didn't include one of my required fields, I would actually get an error as well. I won't show that now, but that validation will work at this API level. So this is how we're helping subscribe to webhooks. So I actually want to manage all of my webhooks for this app, created, updated, deleted. I'm not going to type all this out because that would be like watching paint dry. I'm just going to paste a whole whack of code in here instead. So you can see as I pasted this in, I updated the triggers section, which updated the webhooks I'm subscribing to. So now I've got my created, updated, and deleted webhooks here. I've got my product to save define. That's just all those fields that I made you watch me type out. And for created or updated webhooks, I'm going to go ahead, call that create API, or in the case of updated, in upsert API. I really could just call upsert for both, but I've separated it out here. The additional code that I've added to this sample, everything kind of below this point is just what I walked through. We're just handling the delete here. So all we're doing is we're checking to see if a product actually exists in our database already. And if it does, we're calling the delete action on our product model with the ID from Gadget. So this should handle all of our webhooks. As I create, delete, and update products in BigCommerce, data in Gadget will be up to date. And what this will allow me to do is go ahead and actually kind of build out the logic for my application. Now, if you don't need to store product data for what you're building, it's kind of a bit of a tangent, but it's a use case we see a lot, is if you're doing an integration or a middleware between BigCommerce and an external service like an ERP, a PIM, you might not need to actually store data in Gadget. You might be fine to just like set up a client here for that external service and forward data right away. So you don't need to store information. I'm just kind of doing it here to show you how it all works. But it's definitely not required for all apps. Perfect. So that's great. This will handle all of my webhooks. Now we actually need the custom code that checks to see, are any of my stored keywords entered by my merchants matching my product description. So in order to do that, I'm going to run some custom code on my create and update actions for my BigCommerce product model. I want to share the code between the two. So what I'm going to do to start is actually just create a new file. I'm just going to call it utils. Once again, I'll paste in a bit of code. I'm going to walk through this in a minute. It's just going to be a function that goes ahead and writes any relevant keywords. You see we've got another right here back to BigCommerce. And I'm going to call this from my create and update action. So if I want to call something from here, once again, it's like any other node project. I can go get keywords. From my utils function. And then I can just go ahead and call it. I am going to add just another little function here without deleting my closing bracket. So Gadget actions do have two functions. By default, we're usually only going to give you this run function, but we also have on success. And the difference between the two, run is transactional and it's good for database level operations. So if, for example, I have a blog post model and I want to calculate a word count before storing my blog post record, that's something I could do in run because I'm manipulating my record and then storing it to the database. Like I mentioned, it is transactional. So if anything fails, we roll everything back that happened in that run function. The reason I have my code in this on success is it's good for side effects. So I'm actually writing out to BigCommerce as part of this, my custom code, which can't be rolled back if something fails in my transaction. So that's why everything is in on success right now. On success also has a much longer timeout that is configurable. There's more details in our documentation. It's a max runtime of 15 minutes for our serverless functions, though. In on success, all I am doing, let's just update my update action as well while I'm here. So all I'm doing is I'm checking to see if my record, now everything is going to be fully typed in Gadget. Like I mentioned, TypeScript support is coming soon. So does my record have a store ID? Does it have a description, and is it not empty? If it does, I can go ahead and run my custom code. It looks very similar in update, except we have one little difference here, and that's this record.changed. So Gadget, the reason I'm storing my products in Gadget is because I can take advantage of the built-in change detection. So if my description for my current product record hasn't changed on an update, I don't need to run my custom code. The reason this is important is it prevents webhook loops. So if I go ahead, subscribe to my update webhook, right back to my BigCommerce product, that'll fire another update webhook, which will trigger my custom code, which will write back to my BigCommerce. So it gets into a loop unless we use this change detection. So that's why I'm storing my product records, so I can take advantage of this, so I don't infinitely run right back to BigCommerce and then get a webhook coming in. In my utils file, my custom code here, we're just taking our record as input. You'll notice we can get all of our high context objects, our API client, our log, our connections from the Gadget server package. So that's what we're doing. And just quickly walking through this code, this is the logic powering my app. So I'm just using a regex to split my product description into a set of unique words, using a little set to do that as well. This is where I'm reading my stored search keyword records. So you can see we're using API search keyword find many. If I flip back to my docs, it's the exact same API call. So I've just copied, pasted that in there, and then I'm just mapping over them and getting the values. Finally, I'm just calculating or checking to see if there's any overlap between words in product description and stored keywords. I'm just using a set with a filter and an include. So filtering on the words in my product description and checking to see if each individual word is included in my saved keywords. And so I'm just going to write all of this to my logger down here. This is just some string concatenation. If we do actually have search keywords, we're going to go ahead and create an array just by splitting, concatenating, and then we're going to toString that further down here. Right to the logger. And then once again, we're going to go ahead and set up our BigCommerce API client to write back to BigCommerce. So you see, I am fetching my current store because I have that store ID. I can fetch it from my Gadget database, and I just need my store hash. So I'm selecting that individual field. If I don't include a select, all of my store fields will be included in the response. And then once again, this is the same old space 48 BigCommerce client. I am initializing it a little differently. So because this is in a utility that's being called from a function or an action, I've lost context of what BigCommerce store has fired my webhook. So that means I need to go ahead and await and use for store hash with the store hash to go ahead and set up this API client. And then I can go ahead and write back to my product or update my product. And this is just including all of the required fields as marked in BigCommerce's API. So this should be my backend logic. I now just need a front end. So what I'm going to do, copy paste a bit more code, go back to our web folder here, update my index file. So remember, this was my embedded front end. Before I walk through all of this, I will just mention we are setting up an API client for you. So this is similar to the client that we had in our actions. This is unique to your project. So you'll notice this is just an NPM package, which means we can install it externally. So if you don't want to use Gadget's built-in front ends, you can install this wherever you want. And let's test it out first. Let's get to the good stuff. So if I just go back to my app, I see a permission denied error. This is a happy error in our case. So Gadget is handling your API's authorization layer. So that's the layer kind of between your backend and your front end. If I go back to Gadget, pop open the access control folder, we've got a permissions file. And so by default, BigCommerce merchants in the control panel interacting with your app are going to get this BigCommerce app users role. So it's role-based permissions. We're going to give them access by default just to the store actions because we're going to auto-generate that data model. They're the store owner, so they have access to these actions. I need to go ahead and grant them access to my search keyword model actions, though, and that will allow them to actually interact with my front end. So now if I go ahead and refresh this page, there we go. So I actually see the keyword that I've already entered, cozy, there. And let's just go ahead and enter a few more. We got warm, sweater, sweatpants. And as I add these keywords, they're appearing in my data table. They are also going to appear here in my search keyword data, not my product data. There we go. And I can also, we can also go ahead and delete these if we want, which we'll just call the delete action. So quickly walking through the code for this front end. Like I mentioned, it's all just big design. We have a pretty familiar looking table there. And we're just hooking it up to our Gadget API client. We are using a React use state hook just to manage the selected keyword IDs in the data table. The one neat thing is we are using some of our React hooks to actually interact with our Gadget API client. So just going down here, we've got our use state hook for selected keywords. To actually read our search keywords, we're using this use find many hook. So if I flip back to our docs, we're using this in our backend to read our search keywords. If I go to React, we're using this exact same snippet here to read them from the front end. So that's all we're doing. We have data, which is my return keywords. Once again, everything is typed. Fetching is a Boolean I can use to show a little loading spinner. And then any errors with the request will be in error, and I can pop that in a little modal or banner. We also have use action hooks. In this case, I'm using a use bulk action hook. And this is what I'm calling when I bulk select and actually delete keywords from my table. So once again, I am going to get data fetching and error here. In this case, I'm just using error and aliasing it, pop up a little banner. Because this is an action, I'm actually passing in the action that I want to be called, which is my bulk delete action on my search keyword model. And I get this delete keywords function. This is how I actually run my action. So if I just go and find where we're calling this, should be down here. So it's in the on click, which is in my button, which is in my stateful table component. So when I run this, it'll go ahead, call the delete action and delete any keywords in my database. The last hook we're using is use action form, which is really groovy. So you'll notice I'm not actually managing any of the form state up here myself. Use action form is actually just going to wrap the React hook form library. Can we pop this open? Yes, we can. So we're just wrapping this library. We're sprinkling some gadget context on top. So I can actually pass in the action I want to call when I submit my form. So when I press that submit button, I just want to create new search keywords. And all we're doing, we've got our submit call that we're calling on our form submit. The other interesting one is register. So you can see on my form input, I've got my description label required. I'm actually just registering the name of the field on this model. So remember that search keyword has a field called value, and that's where I'm actually storing my keyword values. Spreading register, it's taking care of all of the things I need for my form. So that's the current value, the on-click handler, etc. And once I do that, my hook form, my use action form hook here is going to manage all of my form state for me. And we can just see we're sprinkling in some of our form state. Like when we're submitting, we'll disable the button so we kind of debounce the action. And this is an example of where we're showing like a loading circle, error messages, etc. That's kind of all my front end though. It's pretty simple. The last thing we really need to do is just test it out. So if I go back to my app here, I've got my keywords. If I go and create a product, let's go sweater here. Add a price, wait, and in this case, a description. This is a cozy, warm sweater. save that. What this will do will trigger our webhook handler here in Gadget. We should go ahead and call our create action, which will run the custom code we added to our product model. And if we check our logs, we should see we have some keyword and description info. So saved keywords is cozy and sweater. That's what we should be writing back to BigCommerce. So if I actually now refresh my page here and go to my storefront details, I see cozy and sweater have been added as search keywords. So we've just built a full stack app in about half an hour, and that's with me maybe explaining things in more detail than necessary. So that's how quick it can be to build with Gadget. Now, of course, building apps is always much quicker when you don't actually have to write any of the code from scratch. But because we've kind of handled that infrastructure layer for you, we're subscribing to webhooks, we're handling OAuth and front-end session tokens, you can go ahead and just start building your unique apps. So it's a lot quicker to get started. And then we're also going to manage and scale your apps for you. So you don't need to worry about turning any knobs in an AWS or Google Cloud dashboard. Once again, the Gadget team is going to do that. So you can just kind of build your app. Because we're building live on the internet here, we are using production infrastructure. If I want to go ahead and deploy to production, we do have a deploy button here. I would just go ahead, set up my production app credentials, and then I'm just going to go ahead and force deploy. And this will take all of my front-end assets. We're going to bundle and minify everything, run database migrations that are required, restart our app, and we'll have a production app. And that's one other thing I want to point out is that I've been working in our development environment. We will also have a production environment, and you can create as many development environments as you want, which is groovy when you're working as a team in Gadget. It means everyone can kind of get their own sandbox, and then you can go ahead and deploy to production. If I check production now, I can see, yep, I've got my data model. I have my custom code, so we are good to go ahead and run our production app. So that was just kind of the end-to-end demo. If anyone has any questions, I am here. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Happy to answer.
There's no questions in the chat just yet, but I was wondering if you could touch on when people are building apps, if they want to implement app extensions or if they want to build a Catalyst integration, like kind of what that looks like using Gadget.
Totally, yeah. So yeah, we do support app extensions, and you can build in Catalyst storefronts. Once again, we do have pop open the web folder here. We're generating this API client for you, so you can actually install this client in a Catalyst storefront. So if I just pop open a Gadget app here, well, I'll just go to my big app listing. And I have it's actually a size chart tutorial. So this isn't our docs if you kind of want to follow from start to finish. All we're doing here is we've got our store model. You'll notice there's an install action. So I've added some custom code to our store install action. So as soon as I install my app on a store, I'm going to go ahead and call the BigCommerce API to actually create a new app extension. So you can go ahead and do this automatically. And then I'm just going to keep track of my app extension ID on my store model. So if I check that out, we have our app extension ID, which is groovy. And then I've got, once again, a product model. In this case, I'm building size charts, size chart app. So I can see I'm just storing size charts in JSON. So what the heck does this look like in an actual store? I think I have it on my other store here, so I'll just switch on over. So here we go. If I click on, there we go, size chart. So this is my app extension. It will pop open my front end. And this is just my embedded front end. All I have done in Gadget, here we go. When I ran my install, I just provided my front end route, product ID, size chart. My web front end, I have a size chart route that I have set up. And once again, this is all just plain old React code, calling my Gadget API with the API client using Big Design. And we have set up this little size chart app. So we can go ahead and add columns, add rows, delete columns, delete rows. This is just sample data that I'm injecting by default, but I can go ahead and save that. If I check my app, That was my journal. So I have a size chart saved. And then I actually have a Catalyst storefront set up. So if I just go ahead and run dev, start that up. And this is my Catalyst project. So like I mentioned, all I've done here, I've got my API client installed on this project already. This is just in the core package JSON file. I've initialized this client just in a separate Gadget TS file I've created. And then in my, and I think it's just product, let's go size chart. There we go. I've just added a size chart component to my product page, and I'm calling my API. I am checking to see if a size chart exists for the certain current product page. And if it does, I'm just rendering a little table in HTML here. So it's plugging right into Catalyst. And if I check this out on my local host, and that was the journal, I believe. So we've added our size chart here. So it does plug in nicely with Catalyst because we have that API client. You're just kind of calling your API like you would from your Gadget front end. You're off to the races, and then you can set up your app extensions as well automatically. So yeah. Thank you for the question. That's pretty groovy.
Awesome. And then I don't know if you can speak to this, but would implementing unified billing be a similar process where you're just going back into the repo, whether you've pulled it down locally or you're on Gadget's site? Is that kind of like how it would work?
Totally, yeah. I haven't stepped through it all myself, but it seems going through the docs, if you're just calling APIs and you need to store some data, you should be able to set up a unified billing app or integrate unified billing on any Gadget app, similar to how we're setting up app extensions. So yeah, that should totally be possible, and I'm super jazzed that it's out now. It would be great to get a little forkable template actually.
Yeah, I think that's on the docket. I think the unified billing
Awesome.
is pretty stoked to see more of that out there. One last thing I'm going to ask about, and then see if there's any questions in the chat. But if you can speak to like source control support and what that looks like when you're using Gadget.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I mentioned we can build locally. Do you want, maybe we're all here. Let's just do it. So if I actually copy this command, I've got my terminal here. I'm just gonna, what do we got here? Yeah, I'll run it here. So when I run this, it's gonna bring my whole Gadget project down to my local machine. So if I just change directory and pop this open, we can see that this is my entire Gadget project. So I still have my API and web folder, access control. If I pop open API, I've got my product model. The key difference is I have these schema files. So this is how Gadget is going to go ahead and support source control for your app. So now that my project is down here locally, I can push to GitHub, GitLab, whatever I use for my project source control, and I'm able to effectively source control my entire full stack app now that it's local. So I can just push this to GitHub. And now, because we have multiple environments, this allows you to create, along with our CLI tool, you can create a CI/CD pipeline. You can create like a staging environment to run some automated tests on. So GitHub can be your source of truth, and you can set up a CI pipeline like you normally do. When you're good, merge into your main branch on GitHub, automate some tests, push everything from GitHub to your staging environment in Gadget, run some automated tests, and then deploy. So it should feel like kind of once you're set up and working, like you're working on any other project. It should kind of feel the same. You can get the same automated processes you do as if you're building everything manually yourself. So yeah. Thanks for asking that as well.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is a masterclass in demoing, but also Gadget is so demoable because it really is so easy for developers to use. Not to take any credit away.
No, that's all good. Yeah. I agree.
So I just want to thank you. There's no questions right now, but I know so many people watch these asynchronously. If you're watching this later in the day and you have questions, feel free to drop them on the video. But you're also welcome to reach out to Riley or myself in our developer Slack space. If you're not in the developer Slack space, I'll put a link to it in the description of the video. You should join, no strings attached. And we really want people to build more apps with Gadget. I think that would be really exciting to see more of those coming through the marketplace. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Riley?
No. Thanks so much for hosting. Gadget.dev is the site, I guess, if you're looking for us. And we also have, if you have Gadget specific questions, a developer Discord that's pretty active. So if you do have development specific questions, you're trying to spin up an app and running into an issue, that's a great place to ask. We've got a great community, as well as all Gadget employees are hanging out in there and happy to answer questions anytime. So yeah, thanks so much. This was a hoot.
Awesome. And I'll put a link to the Discord in the description of the video. So like anything we mention here, you can find in the description. And yeah, thank you so much, Gadget. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thanks.